Hey, David Bruce here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Spinal Tap. So before I do anything else on this lesson, I do have to admit that this is going to be a parody lesson. I'm not going to be overly serious. This is Spinal Tap. But I thought about it, and I thought, there's so many serious things going on in the world. Right now, the election today, there's all this kind of hostility, and people are angry, and people are protesting, and all this stuff. And I thought, well, what can I do to kind of ease some of this tension? And for some reason, after I got home from voting today, I thought, you know what, why don't I just whip out something just silly? Just let's have some fun, let's laugh, let's relax, let's not be so serious. So this is going to be a parody. I am actually going to show you some things, but like I said, this is the Chords of Spinal Tap, so we're going to have some fun and kind of loosen some of this tension in the air. Spinal Tap formed in England in the early 60s, and they were a skiffle group originally. Okay, actually that's not even close to being true. Spinal Tap actually formed in 1979 in Hollywood, California, and it was the brainchild of Rob Reiner and Michael McKean. Michael McKean was famous for portraying Lenny on Laverne and Shirley. And in 1979, there was actually an album released. It was Michael McKean, it was Lenny and the Squigtones. And true story, 1979, you can look it up. I am going to flash an image here too. But on that album in 1979, Christopher Guest actually played guitar and clarinet and did background vocals, I think. But he literally was named Nigel Tufnel on that album. And that was the birth of that character. And, Christopher Guest and Michael McKean kind of working together. And I think also in 1979, they appeared on a TV show called The TV Show. And they didn't really have their full characters yet. But they literally performed, very early as it wasn't really, Spinal Tap yet, but it was basically that group, was slowly starting to form. And of course in 1984, This Is Spinal Tap was released, and arguably the first rockumentary, which it was a parody of rock and hard rock and metal, but it was delivered in a documentary format, and it was revolutionary, hugely popular. It's hilarious, one of the best music related movies ever. Definitely Nigel Tufnel is a guitar legend, even though he's a parody of a guitarist or a guitar legend. He really is, because the things that he said, whether it was in the film or things that he said since then, have resonated. And I've heard countless people quote his lines from This Goes to 11 to talking about Sustain of a Les Paul, and just some of the famous things that he said in the film. It's brilliant, and it's still being passed around and said today. So here's an image with some Nigel Tufnel quotes, just hilarious. And Nigel's definitely appeared at guitar magazines. I remember a Guitar World issue that had Spinal Tap, and I think it had a transcription of Yes's Yours Is No Disgrace. It's funny how you remember certain things like that. Like, yeah, that issue had this song, or it had this lesson, or poster, or whatever. But I do remember that issue. And then actually Nigel appears on Satriani's The Satch tapes, like the old, late 80s, early 90s home video. And the quotes on there, like some of the interview, that they do with Nigel, is hilarious when he's referring to Satriani. He's just in shock, or he's in awe. But Nigel's definitely a important guitar hero, but obviously he's very different than the normal, guitar hero, because he's a fictional character. But what a brilliant character, and so funny. This is going to be a very difficult episode of Chordplay, and I don't mean what we're going to be playing. Most of what we're going to be playing is going to be pretty easy, but it's difficult because it's going to be really hard not to start laughing, especially when I start playing some of these songs and you start thinking of lyrics or scenes from the movie or whatever. This is going to be hard to keep a straight face and not just burst out laughing. For the opening, that's one of my favorite Spinal Tap songs. Tonight I'm Gonna Rock It Tonight. Classic song. I love the kind of, it's almost like a Kiss riff or something in the beginning. And then you got the boogie woogie kind of blues riffs, you know, during the verses. Something like this. Right there, it's all power chords, you know, G to A, down to that E, and then you start bouncing between the G to C, you're grabbing that F, and then making your way back to that A. Something like that. And then hit, you know, C to D, and then E to F, and then it goes to A, and you start doing that boogie woogie, you know, with your pinky. You're kind of moving from A5 to A6. Then do the C to D, and then E to F again, and then do the boogie woogie on B, and then E, and then just start the whole, you know, opening riff over again. Next example is from the song Hellhole, and we've got this. Great, you know, Spinal Tap moment. So it starts off with this little, you know, power chord movement. You know, that D to C sharp, and then D to B to G. And then just start pounding on the A power chord. I guess it's 8 times or 16 times. And then the chorus, and that's going to be E, and then D to A. All power chords. And that last time right there, he starts spelling out these arpeggios. So there's D major, and then A major, and then C major, G major, B flat major, and you're going to include the open D string right there, and then F major and open, use the open A string right there, and then just end on an E power chord right here. Up next, we have the pre-chorus and chorus to Rock and Roll Creation, another great Spinal Tap moment, and it's this part. basically, you know, once again, a lot of power chords, and it kind of starts off with this. You're kind of walking from B, C sharp up to D right there. And then they're basically spelling out, you know, this G, kind of open position G, third fret on the low E with the open D and open G string, and then change to the F sharp right there. So you can think of that as like a G over F sharp, I guess. And then hit that low E power chord. And the second time, you're basically moving from that low E power chord up to the higher E power chord, and then moving between A and D. You're not in that little single note run at the end. And then just kind of these little single note kind of chromatic lines. The first one's chromatic, and then after that it kind of walks through a scale. And then the beginning's just E power chord to B flat, and then G to B flat. Classic song, and it's just so hilarious too. Right, up next is a very early Spinal Tap song. This is back from their skiffle period, or whatever. This is Give Me Some Money. And you can definitely tell in the song that Christopher Guest and Michael McKean had to have gone back and listened to old, you know, Beatles recordings, the Monkees, and a lot of 60s, you know, pop. Because what they played and the tones they used were very authentic. Like, this literally could be a 60s pop song, but it's Spinal Tap. Something like this. Very basic chords, you know, an A major bar chord just strummed in the beginning. And then you're bouncing between E, A, and D back to E. And the first thing you do is hit that low E open, then the chord, you know, the E chord, and then A, D back to E. You know, very standard, you know, kind of chord progression and rhythm in rock. And then move to A, and basically you're going to play A, D to C, back to A. Go back to E. And it's going to move to B, and then you're going to bounce from B to E to D, back to B. And then go back to that E again. And so that was guitar 1's part, and then guitar 2, which I believe is actually, you know, Christopher Guest, or Nigel. He starts and he slides this E off the 12th fret there, you know, to the open position. And then you hear him kind of pick through that same chord progression. So instead of strumming it, you'll hear Christopher doing. He's kind of like, you know, muting the strings and kind of plucking through it. You know, kind of tricky. And then do the same thing in A, and then move D, little partial C back to A. And then back to that E. And a little piece of B. And then back to the... But really interesting how authentic those guitar parts actually were in this parody movie, you know, in a parody of a song from a time period that the band didn't even exist, because it's all fiction. But they did such a great job, you know, capturing that sound and that vibe. It's like, wow, A++, you know, as far as the effort that went into that. Right up next is a huge, you know, Spinal Tap song, Stonehenge, of course. And I literally thought about making this lesson after I voted today. So there wasn't a lot of planning or prep, you know, for this lesson. I just thought, you know what? I'm going to do Spinal Tap today. And I don't have Smell the Glove back there. That's actually just a black folder that I cut and stuck into that album frame. It looks like Smell the Glove, though. So I didn't want anybody to think, wow, you actually have, you know, I don't have Spinal Tap on vinyl. but it looks like I do because that's literally the right cover. But anyway, for Stonehenge, I didn't have time to make, an 18-inch Stonehenge monument. I wish I could have, had like some fishing string or something. I could have had it lowered while I played. Anyway, something like this. You can see in the beginning we're basically playing octaves, and it's this like bizarre, almost kind of a twisted chromatic idea. And technically it's octaves, and then at the end there's kind of an arpeggio. There aren't really even chords in this. I just wanted to feature Stonehenge. So I figured, well, this will work, for the beginning. And you're literally just walking down. And just creating this odd, kind of sinister, melodic line. And then right here, this is technically going to function as D minor major 9. And then, D minor at the end. I've saved the best for last. Some of you were expecting this. Some of you were probably hoping I wouldn't show this, but I'm totally going to go there. And you can see I'm on bass, too. And you might be thinking, well, wait, you can't play chords on a bass. But you totally can. Just listen to Jaco Pastorius, Billy Sheehan. There's a ton of players. You can totally play chords on a bass. But basically, I did want to mention I picked up this, it's like a TMB 30, I think, Ibanez Tallman bass. It's short scale, and it's the only bass I have in my studio. I picked this up last year. I really like this bass. I think it was like $179 or something. It wasn't even $200. But I picked this up just because I needed a bass in my studio for some recording and guitar player lessons and some different things. And I didn't want to sink a whole lot of money into it, where I thought, well, I don't want to get carried away here. I just need something good, that's going to stay in tune, that's going to sound good, that I can record with. I'm not going to be performing or anything like that. I'm just thinking, okay, just a good studio bass. And this thing's exceptional for the money. Great tone. It's short scale, so that way, it's not quite as long necked as an actual bass. So if you're a guitarist, that can kind of hurt your wrist if you're not used to that extra length. So this is good if I'm kind of going back and forth between guitar and bass, and it's not going to freak my hand or my wrist out or whatever. It's comfortable, it sounds good, and it's funky, kind of retro too. But anyway, with Big Bottom, it starts with single notes, and then you start seeing some chords pop up, and something like this. Something like that. And a very familiar bass line too, which is so funny, from a parody movie from the 80s, from 1984. And people recognize that today. And they're like, hey, you're playing Big Bottom. It's like, well, yeah. It's so funny how these songs have had a life of their own. But, starts off with this. Just kind of grooving those single notes, kind of moving into that D. And then eventually it's going to play basically a C power chord with the open A. And then you're going to move into a D power chord right there. And then it starts moving like this. And that's actually going to function as a chord. That's going to function like a D7, what, D7 sus4, and that's going to function as a D6 if you're thinking of that as the root. I got through this segment of the lesson and I didn't laugh because Big Bottom is hilarious. There's something to be said about Spinal Tap and, you know, the magnificent minds behind the movie, including Rob Reiner too. But there's something to be said because, you know, there's certain musicians, there's certain songs, even, you know, full albums that have this humor injected into it. You know, Frank Zappa's famous quote, "Does humor belong in music?" And I firmly believe, yes, it does. You know, maybe not all the time, maybe not every song. You know, there are times to be serious, there's times to be angry and kind of random or, you know, whatever. But humor is important. You know, I'm influenced massively by music, but I'm also influenced by humor and comedy. You know, I grew up watching, you know, Saturday Night Live and Monty Python's Flying Circus and stuff like that. So even at a very, very young age, before I even touched a guitar, I liked jokes. I liked kind of kidding around and silly songs and, you know, Looney Tunes and cartoons and stuff like that. Scooby-Doo, I was obsessed with. So, you know, as soon as I started getting into music, as soon as I heard people like Frank Zappa, or I heard, you know, comedy albums, Steve Martin or somebody like that, or I heard, you know, laughter kind of mixed with emotion and music, it kind of resonated with me where I thought, okay, you know, music can be serious, but it can also be downright silly. You know, listen to any, you know, legendary, you know, comedy musician, Weird Al Yankovic or someone like that. You know, I mean, there's a bunch of them. And I respect all of them because not only are they bridging, you know, music and kind of, you know, reaching people with music and song, but they're also reaching people with humor. You know, so if you can entertain somebody with music and also make them laugh, that's like a, you know, a double-edged sword right there or something. That's a powerful thing because you're entertaining and you're moving people with music, but you're also making them smile, making them laugh, which I think is always a good thing. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.